Fear doesn't always sound like a scream. Sometimes it looks like silence after a failed attack. Let that sink in, chosen one, because what just happened is bigger than gossip, bigger than hate, and bigger than any plan that group of so-called witches thought they had against you. They formed their gang, they circled up, they whispered their dark little intentions under the moon. And yet, here you are, untouched, stronger, glowing like a one-man army that no storm could drown. Now imagine this for a moment. Chosen one. An entire army of shadows aiming their arrows at a single target, confident they'll bring you down. They sharpen, they aim, they release, all at once. But instead of piercing you, the arrows turn to dust in mid-air. That's exactly what happened here. Their numbers didn't matter. Their group chants didn't matter. Their so-called power was nothing when faced with the light you carry inside. And now the same people who swore they would bury you are terrified. Because you didn't just survive. You flipped their whole operation back onto them. Fact. When groups try to manipulate energy against a single focused soul, they create cracks in their own circle. Studies show mob mentality collapses when fear enters the group, and fear entered their camp the second you didn't fall. They expected you to break down, to lose sleep, to panic. Instead, you carried on with your day, maybe even smiled, maybe even laughed, while their rituals backfired. That's the part that scares them to death. They've realized numbers mean nothing against a force the universe itself has chosen to protect. And thank you, chosen one, for being here. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing like and subscribe so more souls can hear what the enemy tried to hide. It's our responsibility to spread the light, to stand as one army against the dark, and you, chosen one, are already a part of that force. So thank you for walking this path with me. Now let's get back to it. The truth is, you didn't even know half of the things they were trying behind your back. They gathered in secret, they schemed in whispers, they relied on numbers to make themselves feel powerful. But that's the illusion of gangs, isn't it? Without each other, they're weak. Without backup, they're nothing. And here's the twist. They needed 10, 20, maybe more to stand against you, but you didn't need anyone. You were the one-man army that scattered their camp like dust in the wind. Think of it like this. A single spark in a dry forest doesn't ask permission. It doesn't need help. It ignites, and suddenly the entire landscape is consumed. That's what your presence did to their network. They thought they were the hunters, but they became the hunted the moment you walked into the room. Even their strongest couldn't stand the weight of your energy. And now, they're scattered, exposed, pointing fingers at each other, trying to figure out why their unity crumbled while you stand tall, unshaken. You see, chosen one, what terrifies them most isn't that you fought back. It's that you didn't have to. You didn't swing a sword. You didn't chant a word. You didn't even break stride. You defeated a gang without raising a hand, because your existence alone was enough to dismantle their illusions. That's the kind of victory they can't explain away, the kind that leaves them wide-eyed, sleepless, and checking over their shoulders. And let's be honest, some of them are already running scared. Watch how they suddenly shift their language, how they try to dress up in light clothing, pretending they were never part of the shadows. They'll post quotes, talk about peace, even borrow lines from philosophies they don't believe in, all because deep down they know what just happened. Their gang failed, their power cracked. And the chosen one they targeted didn't just walk away. You walked away more powerful than before. This is why they're scared to death. Not because you shouted louder, not because you gathered allies, but because you proved that no amount of darkness can stand against a single flame of truth. And this is only the beginning. Stay with me, Chosen One, because in this message we're about to uncover exactly why your one-man army victory is shaking entire groups to their core, why the universe made sure you couldn't be touched, and what it means for the path ahead. You've already won, and now it's time to understand just how deep that victory goes. So, Chosen One, are you ready to peel back every layer of what really happened here? Step by step, we're going to break down how you, a single soul, dismantled an entire gang that thought they had you cornered. Drop a comment with the number 77 if you can feel the power of standing alone while a whole group trembles in fear. And don't just watch halfway, because if you're truly a chosen one, you'll feel that pull to stay until the very end of this message. Every second of what's coming will prove exactly why they're scared to death of you right now. So tighten your grip, lock in, and let's get started. Number 1, you shattered their circle without even lifting a finger. Strength isn't loud, it's the silence that makes your enemies panic when every single one of their attacks fails. That's exactly what happened, Chosen One. They built their entire strategy around the idea that you would break, that the weight of their rituals and whispers would crush your spirit. They brought out every trick in the book. Rituals under the full moon, herbs, candles, chants echoing in the dark, and a whole coven hiding behind each other for backup. They thought numbers meant power. They thought symbols and theatrics meant control. But here's the truth. They needed all of that just to stand a chance against you. And even then, it wasn't enough. Now imagine this. A circle of people huddled together in the night, chanting, raising energy, trying to conjure some kind of storm. They're sweating, desperate, throwing everything into their ritual. But across town, you're sitting in your room, maybe drinking tea, maybe scrolling your phone, maybe just trying to get through another day. You weren't casting anything, you weren't even thinking about them. Yet the energy they raised collapsed back on themselves. Their circle cracked because your very existence, your alignment, was heavier than the weight of their performance. That's what terrifies them. You didn't even fight, but they lost anyway. And let's be honest, some of you wonder, but how? How can just existing be more powerful than all of that? Here's the answer. When someone is desperate to control you, it means they've already lost control of themselves. They lean on props, on groups, on staged theatrics, because without them they are nothing. Meanwhile, you carry something they can't replicate. Presence. Not performance, not pretense. Presence. And presence, Chosen One, is the kind of force that rattles their bones because it can't be rehearsed, bought, or manufactured. They tried to simulate power through rituals, but authority isn't something you can fake. It either lives in you or it doesn't. And with you, it lives, it breathes, and it burns. Picture a wildfire starting from a single spark. No one sees it at first, no one expects it, but suddenly the trees ignite, the air thickens, the flames consume everything in their path. That's you. While they were lighting candles, you were carrying a flame that couldn't be extinguished. You didn't even aim it at them, yet their carefully built structures went up in smoke the moment you walked by. That's why they're scared to death. They realize their power is borrowed, fragile, weak. Yours is natural, effortless, and unshaken. They thought you would retaliate, that you'd stoop to their level, cast your own spells, swing your own energy back at them. But you didn't. You didn't need to. You stood still, and in standing still, you broke the storm around you. They were waiting for a counterattack, something they could measure, something they could prepare for. Instead, they were left fighting shadows, falling apart while you kept moving forward untouched. They can't process that kind of resilience. They can't handle the fact that your survival itself was the victory. And here's another truth. While they were plotting against you, you weren't plotting against them. You were just trying to live, to heal, to find clarity in your own journey. Every breath you took in peace was a strike against their chaos. Every smile, every step forward, every moment you refused to collapse. It was all destruction to the foundation of what they were building. They worked in secret, hoping to pull you down, but in reality, every failed attempt drained them while you rose higher. That's the kind of power they can't explain, the kind of power that makes them whisper your name with fear now. Some of them are asking themselves, how did this happen? How did we lose when we were so many and they were just one? But that's the lesson. They were many, yes, but broken. You were one, but whole. And wholeness always outweighs numbers. It's like a fortress built of stone compared to a dozen shacks made of straw. When the storm comes, the shacks scatter, the fortress stands. That fortress is you. And what really breaks them, the fact that you weren't even trying to destroy them. You didn't wake up planning their downfall. You didn't set out to crush their coven. You were simply being who you are, living, breathing, rising. And that alone dismantled them. That's what makes you dangerous to darkness. You don't need revenge. You don't need candles or curses or chants. You don't even need to prove yourself. Your very presence shifted the game, and they couldn't keep up. They poured everything into performance. You carried presence, and presence, chosen one, can't be stolen or copied. It can only be carried by someone who is aligned with truth. That's why they're shaking. They know now that no amount of rituals can touch you, no number of group meetings can break you, no amount of chanting can bend you. You've already proven you're untouchable. Not because you're physically invincible, but because the universe has marked you in a way they'll never decode. So here you are, chosen one, walking proof that one person aligned with truth outweighs 100 people clinging to lies. Their candles burned out, their chants dissolved, their altars cracked, and their plans unraveled. Meanwhile, you stood tall, probably unaware of just how much damage your existence was doing to their camp. That's what makes this so satisfying. You didn't even have to try, and that's what makes them afraid. Because if this is what happens when you're just living, what happens if you actually step into your full power? That question keeps them awake at night. Remember this, survival isn't weakness. It's victory. They needed rituals. You needed nothing but breath. They needed numbers. You needed nothing but presence. They needed illusions. You carried reality. And reality, chosen one, always wins. That's why you're still here, stronger than before, while their coven is shattered in silence. That's the truth they can't handle, and that's the fear they can't escape. Number 2. They swarmed you with crowds, but you stood tall with authority. Noise doesn't equal power, it just reveals desperation. Let that sit in your chest, chosen one, because what they threw at you wasn't strength. It was panic disguised as numbers. They believed if they gathered enough people, if they raised enough voices, if they created a chorus of spells and opinions, somehow that would outweigh you. They thought numbers would bury you. But here's the brutal truth. They confused quantity with authority. And authority is something they will never touch. Now imagine this for a moment. A mob gathers in the street, hundreds screaming, waving their hands, chanting as if volume alone could shake a mountain. Yet right in the middle of all that noise stands a soldier, calm, silent, unmoved. The mob pushes forward, but the ground doesn't tremble. The soldier doesn't flinch. Why? Because mountains don't move for noise, they move for rank. And you, chosen one, are that soldier. They had numbers, but you had clearance. They had a crowd, but you had position. Quote this in your spirit. A crown doesn't need defenders because its authority is built into its existence. That's what they couldn't grasp. They thought you were just another target, someone easy to fold under pressure. But what they didn't realize is you were not operating on their level. While they whispered in secret, you were already seated in a position that outranked their entire group. Authority doesn't scream. Authority doesn't gather a choir. Authority speaks once, and the universe bends. And some of you may ask, but how can one outrank many? How can a single presence outweigh a circle of voices? Here's your answer. True authority isn't measured by head count. It's measured by the weight of what you carry. They could stack 10, 20, 50 people against you, and it would still crumble, because the order of rank isn't decided by who shouts the loudest. It's decided by alignment, by position, by the universe itself, assigning power. They mistook democracy for dominance, and in the spiritual world, that math doesn't add up. Imagine again a courtroom filled with noise, lawyers debating, witnesses crying, a crowd murmuring. It feels chaotic, overwhelming. But then the judge enters. The gavel hits the desk once, and silence falls. Did the judge shout louder than the crowd? No, the judge didn't need to. The authority of position commanded stillness. That's you, chosen one. They were the crowd, chaotic, loud, desperate. You were the gavel, striking once without effort, and their noise evaporated. A mob is just a collection of fear trying to hide itself in numbers. Let that sting them, because when they came in groups, when they gathered their coven to throw shade, to project energy, to chant against you, they weren't showing strength. They were showing how terrified they were of you alone. They needed each other just to face you. That's what should make you smile, chosen one. Because one of you was enough to make 10 of them huddle together like children in the dark. Think of it like chess. They had pawns lined up in rows, moving together, thinking numbers alone could trap the king. But what they didn't realize is the game doesn't end when pawns crowd the board. It ends when rank is revealed. The king stands untouchable, not because of numbers, but because of the rules of the game. You are that king. They were pawns, and pawns can scream, surround, sacrifice, but they will never outrank the piece that controls the game. And let's address the question lingering in your mind. Did I really win, or did they just fail? No, chosen one, you didn't win by accident. You won because they were never in your league to begin with. You were forged differently. While they relied on group chants, you were shaped through silence. While they hid in secrecy, you stood in scars. While they manipulated others to feel strong, you were refined in isolation to be strong. That's why they lost. Because your rank wasn't handed to you by peers. It was carved into you by survival. Here's another metaphor to brand into your mind. Imagine 100 candles flickering in a dark room. Together they feel impressive. They glow, they sway, they fill the space with light. But then the sun rises. One blaze wipes out 100 candles without even trying. That's you. They were the candles. You were the sun. Their collective light had meaning only until you showed up, and the moment you did, their significance vanished. That's why they fear you now. Quote this again. Position beats popularity every time. They had the illusion of power because they were many, but what they couldn't fake was your rank. You didn't need allies, you didn't need validation, you didn't need to stand on a stage to be seen. You walked in authority that silenced their entire gang. And now they whisper, they doubt, they second-guess themselves because deep down they know the truth. They were never equal to you. So let's make this plain. They waged war with numbers. You countered with rank. They came like wolves in a pack, but you were the lion that doesn't need a crowd. And here's the brutal beauty of it. The pack fears the lion even when the lion walks alone. That's the energy you carry. You are the lion in their forest. That's why their voices are trembling now, because numbers can't buy courage and they can't buy authority. And while they're still gathering, still scheming, still whispering in corners, here you are, one person, untouched, unbothered, and undefeated. They didn't realize that every attempt against you was actually exposing them. Every group effort that failed left cracks in their circle. And the cracks grew until their unity shattered. Now, instead of standing against you, they're standing against each other, trying to figure out why their numbers didn't add up. So don't ever doubt yourself again, chosen one. You didn't just survive their attacks. You outranked them without lifting a finger. You didn't just face a gang. You proved that one aligned soul is stronger than 1,000 lost ones. You didn't just walk away, you walked away higher, untouchable, leaving them in ruins. And the universe made sure they know it. That's why they're scared. That's why they whisper. That's why they'll never forget your name. Number 3. You outlasted their darkness until their spells burned out. Time always exposes the weaker fighter. That's what crushed them, chosen one. They didn't swing for one knockout punch. That would have been too simple. Instead, they plotted for the long game. They wanted to chip away at you slowly, piece by piece, until you collapsed on your own. They thought death by 1,000 cuts would be your story. But here you are, still breathing, still rising, still terrifying them because you survived the very timeline they built to bury you. Now imagine this. They send storm after storm, like waves crashing against a cliff. At first, it looks like the water might swallow it. But years pass, decades even, and the cliff is still standing. Scarred, yes, but unshakable. That's you. They tried financial hits, sudden betrayals, emotional chaos, silent nights filled with pressure that no one else could see. They thought the repetition would wear you down. Instead, every wave made you sharper, harder, more dangerous. And maybe you've asked yourself, why didn't they just stop? Why keep pressing? The answer is simple, because your endurance enraged them. They weren't expecting you to last this long. You weren't supposed to have fire in your eyes after so much loss. You weren't supposed to hold on to sanity when the walls were caving in. You weren't supposed to keep waking up when their entire strategy was built around seeing you stay down. But every morning you rose, their entire plan cracked. Quote this in your heart. Endurance is the graveyard of every enemy's strategy. That's what you gave them, a slow death. They invested time, rituals, energy and focus, only to watch it all disintegrate because you kept showing up. They thought they were playing chess, moving carefully, but they forgot chess has a clock, and their time ran out while you remained on the board. Here's another picture, a candle burning in the night. They huddled, waiting for the flame to burn itself out, but instead, your candle grew into a fire they couldn't contain. Their spells, their whispers, their petty attacks, they all dissolved in the light of your persistence. You didn't fight them with spells. You fought them with survival. Every day you refused to quit was another blow to their coven. And the final nail in their coffin? The storm didn't make you bitter, it made you stronger. They built weapons to break you, but all they did was forge you into something untouchable. Number 4. You became the mirror that shattered their illusions. Darkness dies the moment it sees its own reflection. That's what destroyed them, chosen one. They believed their spells, their curses, their envy would cling to you like chains. But what they didn't know is that your spirit was too clean, too aligned, too untouchable to absorb filth. And so everything they threw your way didn't land, it bounced. Not only did it bounce, it came back harder, sharper, amplified. In trying to break you, they ended up breaking themselves. Imagine this. They hurl mud with both hands, convinced they'll stain your white garment. But the garment isn't cloth, it's a mirror. The mud splatters back on their own face, dripping down, exposing them for what they are. That's exactly what happened. Their curses cracked their own homes. Their rituals split their own circles. Some woke up to night terrors, others faced sudden illnesses, chaotic fights in their covens, or financial collapse. They thought they were attacking you, but every strike landed on themselves. That's the horror they never calculated, and maybe you've wondered, but why me? Why did their attacks fail on me when others fall victim? The answer is brutal but simple, because your motives are clean. You weren't plotting revenge. You weren't scheming against them. You were focused on growth, healing, evolving. Purity terrifies corruption because it cannot stick. Your life acted like glass. They stared into it and saw the ugliness of their own intentions magnified. That's why they panic when your joy shines after their sabotage. That's why they choke when your peace shows up after their chaos. Your very survival humiliated them. Quote this and remember it. Alignment is the deadliest armor. You didn't cast counterspells. You didn't raise altars. You didn't even fight. You simply stood in your truth, and truth itself became their destruction. Every smile you wore after an attack was a dagger in their chest. Every success after their sabotage was proof that their rituals were powerless. They set traps for you, but walked into them themselves. Now imagine this too. They built a house on sand, fragile and weak, thinking it could withstand storms. You, however, stood on rock, so when the waves came, their house crumbled while you stood tall, untouched. That's the metaphor of their magic. It collapsed on its own weight when it met your foundation. And now they live with fear, because if their spells failed so violently against you, what does that mean for their entire belief system? You became the experiment that ended their illusion. They don't just fear your strength anymore, they fear your reflection. Because every curse they send shows them exactly what they carry inside, and that, chosen one, is a nightmare they can never escape. Number 5. You moved through doors they'll never even see. Privilege isn't stolen, it's granted. That's the wound they can't heal, chosen one. While they scraped, clawed and tricked their way into shadows, you were handed access they'll never touch. They conjured spirits, drew circles, lit candles, and begged for fragments of borrowed power. You didn't need to manipulate anything. You were invited. That's the difference that haunts them. You weren't performing for power, you were positioned for it. But now imagine this. A thief spends all night picking locks, breaking windows, sneaking into rooms that don't belong to them. They sweat, they panic, they hope not to get caught. But you walk through the front door with a key in your hand because you belong there. That's what burns them alive. They risk everything for access to temporary shadows, while you were trusted with keys to rooms their rituals can't even locate. Quote this and let it cut deep. Imitation can entertain, but it can never replace authority. Their chants, their rituals, their secrecy, it all looks powerful on the surface, but it's hollow, it's mimicry. They fake light, you embody light. They copy peace, you carry peace that crushes chaos on arrival. Every step you take exposes the fact that they've been pretending all along. that humiliation is heavier than any curse they could send your way. Think about this too. They study scripts of manipulation for years, memorizing how to twist energy to their will. But while they rehearse, you receive. While they perform, you reveal. Your revelations dismantle their constructions, because truth outlives trickery every single time. They spent nights in rituals for outcomes that fade in days, but you carry blueprints downloaded straight into your soul, designs that no one can counterfeit. That's why your moves shift atmospheres without you trying. And maybe you've asked, why me? Why do I walk with access they can't copy? The answer is brutal. It's because of the price you paid. They'll never replicate your access because they can't endure what forged you. It required surrender. It required sacrifice. It required letting your pride burn down until only alignment remained. They won't pay that price. Their ego won't allow it. That's why they'll always be beggars at the gate, while you walk inside freely. And here's the part that terrifies them most. The very access they envied became your shield. They tried to destroy you, but every attempt slammed against a gate they'll never open. You're walking in a dimension permanently off limits to them, and that fact alone has fear lodged deep in their bones. Number 6. They tried to hunt you, but became the cautionary tale. Those who mistake prey for predator end up becoming the warning sign. That's the reality your enemies are living in right now, chosen one. They thought you were easy to break, an isolated figure they could corner. They marked you like scavengers circling a wounded animal, convinced you wouldn't last under the weight of their warfare. But what they didn't realize is that silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. You weren't prey. You were the trap. And the moment they touched you, they walked straight into their own destruction. Imagine this. Hunters chasing what they believe is a weak deer, only to discover they've been stalking a lion the entire time. By the time they realize it's too late, the lion isn't running, it's watching. That's what happened here. They mistook your quietness for fragility, your lack of connection to their circles for vulnerability. But every move they made was being recorded, every curse they whispered logged, every scheme documented. They thought they were orchestrating your downfall. In reality, they were writing their own obituary. Quote this and let it sink in. Your enemies were your assignment, but you became their lesson, because now their names carry the weight of warning. Everything they tried on you backfired publicly, spiritually, generationally. Some lost things they'll never recover. Health, stability, opportunities, while others spiraled into chaos they never saw coming. And none of it happened because you fought them. It happened because you didn't have to. They violated a law bigger than them, and the universe responded accordingly. And maybe you've wondered, why me? Why did they even target me in the first place? The answer is sharp. They underestimated you because you weren't loud. You weren't trying to shine in their faces or gather an audience. That made you look small to them. But chosen ones are never small. What they missed is that you were protected by protocol. There's an order they couldn't see, and you were operating inside it. That's why your survival became their exposure. Think of it like this. They dug pits waiting to watch you fall in, but every pit became their own grave. They slammed doors in your face, only to watch others swing wide open for you. They spread rumors, mocked your progress, undermined your worth, but then had to watch you climb higher while their own blessings dried up. That shook them to the core because you weren't supposed to make it. Yet you did. And now, you're the evidence. You're the case study. You're the reason others are backing off, whispering your name in fear. You are no longer just a survivor. You are the statement, the living example of what happens when people come for someone who is backed by forces beyond manipulation. They wrote your name as an assignment, but it ended up etched into history as their aftermath. And that's why their fear runs deeper than ever. Number 7. Their crowds made them fragile. Your solitude turned you into steel. Crowds create noise. Isolation creates weapons. That's the difference, chosen one. They thought their strength was in numbers. Dozens of them huddled together, repeating chants, tossing spells into the air, hyping each other up with false confidence. They convinced themselves that unity in darkness would outweigh a single light. But what they didn't realize is this: light doesn't need backup. It only needs to shine. Now imagine this: a pack of wolves circling, howling louder and louder, trying to intimidate one lone figure in the clearing. But the figure doesn't flinch. Because the wolves are many, yes, but they're weak without each other. And that one figure? That's you, chosen one. Alone doesn't mean powerless. Alone means sharpened. Alone means disciplined. While they gathered to draw strength from each other's noise, you were forged in silence, turned into something deadly in the furnace of solitude. Quote this and let it burn into you. Isolation is where survivors become assassins. They mistook your loneliness for fragility, but what was happening beneath the surface was transformation. Every night you felt misunderstood, every betrayal that left you gutted, every tear shed in silence. It was stripping you of illusions, attachments, and weakness. They thought you were sitting quietly, waiting to be crushed. In reality, you were being sharpened like a blade in the fire. Here's the truth they never saw. Their unity was built on manipulation, on control, on hyping each other into a frenzy. Yours was built in the fire of nights when you couldn't sleep, days when you felt like giving up, moments when you stood, even though no one stood with you. That's the kind of training no group ritual can ever match. They were organized. You were disciplined. They had numbers. You had precision. They leaned on each other's energy. You leaned on something eternal. And maybe you've wondered, why did I have to go through so much isolation? Why so much silence? Because isolation is the furnace of the chosen. It strips away everything false until only what's real remains. You weren't weakened by being alone. You were made unstoppable by it. They can only move as a pack because none of them are strong enough alone. You terrify them because you became lethal without needing a crowd. Think of fire. Fire doesn't need permission. Fire doesn't need a committee. Fire consumes. That's you. They tried to crush you with collective power, but your soul was already reinforced by the battles they never saw. You didn't just survive isolation, you mastered it. And now, chosen one, your solitude has become the weapon they'll never know how to counter. Number 8. They failed to decode you because you operate beyond their reach. Confusion is the enemy's punishment for trying to read what was never written for them. That's what crippled them, chosen one. They threw everything they had at you, spying rituals, energy scans, spirits sent to watch. They wanted to chart your moves, predict your next step, map out your destiny like it was theirs to control. But every attempt left them staring into static. They couldn't track you, couldn't decode you, couldn't even guess right. You showed up like a vault sealed with codes they'll never crack. Now imagine this: a thief crouches outside a mansion with lockpicks, convinced they'll slip inside like always. But when they touch the door, the locks rearrange themselves. Every tool bends, every method fails, and suddenly the thief realizes this isn't a house, it's a fortress designed for intruders to break themselves against. That's you. They've read others like open books, but you showed up like a language they don't even recognize. Quote this and let it sting. What can't be read can't be controlled. That's the terror you put into them. They're used to people built from wounds, fears and insecurities, templates they know how to exploit. But you? You weren't built from ego or trauma. You were constructed with purpose, clarity and codes that don't exist in their dimension. That's why every time they tuned into your frequency, they got static. Their tools were made for lower realms. You were born from higher terrain. And maybe you've wondered, but why did their visions always fail with me? Because you don't live in their patterns. You don't move on predictable cycles. You move on alignment, and alignment doesn't leave footprints. That's why their dreams became scrambled, their visions distorted, their spirits disoriented. They could read everyone else's story like chapters in a novel, but when it came to you, their pages went blank. Think about it like this. They operate like weather forecasters, predicting storms by reading clouds. But you're not a cloud, you're lightning. You appear without warning, striking where you will, impossible to track until the shockwave hits. That's why they're terrified now. You're unpredictable, and unpredictability makes their whole system collapse. Every failed attempt to read you didn't just frustrate them, it backfired. Headaches, false dreams, twisted signals. They weren't just locked out, they were punished for even trying. Because your spirit isn't open real estate. It's encrypted, it's sealed, it's protected by firewalls they'll never hack. And that's why they finally stopped trying. Every time they looked at you, all they saw was the reflection of their own limits. Number 9. Their worst nightmare was you waking up to yourself. The most dangerous enemy is not the one with weapons, it's the one who remembers who they are. That's what terrified them about you, chosen one. The battle was never just curses, spells, or rituals. Those were distractions. Their real war against you was psychological, gaslighting, manipulation, illusions designed to make you forget your reflection. Because if you never saw yourself clearly, you'd never rise into the position that would dismantle everything they built. Now imagine this, a lion cub raised among sheep, told every day it's weak, small, and ordinary. The sheep mock it, control it, even convince it to bow its head. But one day, the cub hears its own roar, and in that instant the entire illusion collapses. That's you. From the start, they knew you weren't ordinary. That's why they targeted you so early, why the attacks were so relentless. They weren't fighting your present. They were terrified of your future. Quote this and let it pierce. Their greatest spell was the lie that you were powerless. They planted voices around you repeating the same phrase, "You're nothing special. You won't make it. You're broken." They engineered environments to box you in, toxic relationships to echo their lies, all to program you into believing you were small. But deep inside, you always carried a knowing, not proof, not evidence, just a quiet, stubborn certainty that you were more than they told you, and that knowing kept you alive. Maybe you've asked yourself, why did they come after my mind so hard? Why the manipulation? Because identity is nuclear. Once you wake up to who you are, every trap loses power. Every structure built on your silence starts to crumble. The moment you stop begging for permission and step into position, their control evaporates. That's why they tried to kill your memory of yourself, because they knew the second you remembered, it was over. Think about it. They can fight someone who's blind to their strength, but they can't fight someone who's aware. Awareness makes you unshakable. Awareness makes you untouchable. You didn't need perfection to win. You needed clarity. And the moment that clarity hit you, you stopped reacting to their games. You began operating from your seat, not from fear. That's what destroyed them, chosen one. Now the veil has lifted. You know who you are, and that truth by itself is already more destructive to their kingdom than every ritual they ever performed. That's why they whisper now, why they hide, why they shake. Because their nightmare came true, you woke up. Number 10. They watched you burn and still rise untouched. Fire doesn't destroy diamonds, it reveals them. That's the nightmare they live with. Chosen one. They didn't want to simply hurt you. Their plan was total annihilation. They built infernos with precision, tailoring every flame to scorch you at your core, betrayals designed to tear your heart apart, financial sabotage engineered to crush your will, isolation deep enough to make your soul ache. They thought there was no way you'd walk out of those flames whole. But you did, and not only did you survive, you rose with no burn marks, no bitterness, no brokenness, no disfigurement to your soul. That's what leaves them sleepless. They watched you step out of hell's furnace, stronger, sharper, and somehow brighter than when you went in. They waited for you to unravel. Instead, you evolved. Now imagine this. A blacksmith throws raw steel into the fire, expecting it to crack. The flames roar, sparks fly, the heat is unbearable. But when the steel emerges, it isn't weaker. It's forged into a blade sharper than anything that entered the furnace. That's you. They tried to incinerate you. The fire was supposed to destroy. Instead, it refined. Instead of scars, you came out with clarity. Instead of ashes, you came out with armor. Quote this and let it echo. The fire they lit for your funeral became the forge of your rebirth. That's the story they can't erase. They whispered curses, launched betrayals, threw slander into your name, waiting for smoke to choke your spirit. But when the smoke cleared, you were standing tall, glowing, unstoppable. Not only did the fire fail to consume you, it announced you. And maybe you've asked, why didn't it kill me? Why didn't I collapse under all that heat? Because the fire was never meant to end you. It was meant to reveal you. What they mistook as punishment was preparation. Every flame burned away what you didn't need. Every betrayal stripped away the dead weight. Every loss carved out space for the rise they never saw coming. Here's the irony that eats them alive. They know what they did. They know the pressure they applied, the traps they set, the curses they whispered, yet they're forced to watch you walk around today with peace, clarity, joy, and purpose. No smoke on your name. No stain on your spirit, no trace of destruction, just a version of you they can't touch anymore. The truth is brutal. If that didn't break you, nothing ever will. Their greatest weapons only forged your invincibility, and now they're trembling, not because of what you said, but because of what you became. Living proof that fire bows to the one who survives it. Evidence that hell has limits, and now they know, chosen one, if flames couldn't consume you, they never stood a chance at all. Number 11. Their spells were precise, but your alignment was deadlier. Force collapses where alignment flows. That single truth destroyed them. Chosen one. They poured decades into their craft, hours of training, rituals refined like science, nights spent memorizing incantations, and years mastering how to bend fragile souls with their tools. They were disciplined, intentional, and relentless. And still, everything they built shattered under one thing they couldn't calculate: your obedience. Not noise, not counterattacks, not rituals, just your steady, quiet alignment with a higher order they'll never touch. Now imagine this. A master swordsman trains for years, sharpening his blade, rehearsing every move in hopes of dominance. Then he challenges someone who doesn't even draw a sword, someone who simply steps aside at the exact right moment. The swordsman stumbles, falls on his own blade, undone by timing, not force. That's you. They thought power was in the swing of their weapons, but your strength was in moving with perfect precision when instructed. Quote this and let it pierce. Obedience is the one weapon darkness cannot decode. They work by manipulation, you move by revelation. They force outcomes, you flow in timing. That's why their spells collapsed in confusion while you stood untouched. Because every time you said yes to a prompting that made no sense, heal when it hurt, forgive when it burned, walk away when you wanted to stay, you triggered collapses in their spiritual structures. And maybe you've asked yourself, how could my small acts really matter against their massive rituals? The answer is brutal, because obedience doesn't work on human math. It bypasses performance and plugs directly into authority. They were casting circles, but you were circling your soul in surrender. They were chanting for control, but you were listening in silence. They were plotting in secret, but you were moving in plain sight under instruction they couldn't track. Think about it like this. They're architects building elaborate castles out of sand, confident in their blueprints. You're the tide, moving quietly, guided by a force greater than yourself. When the tide comes in, no sand castle stands, no matter how impressive it looks. That's why they fear you. Not because you fought back, but because every quiet yes drowned their work without effort. They can't replicate what you carry. They can steal rituals, trade secrets, mimic light, but they can't copy obedience. Your alignment doesn't just protect you, it dismantles them. It releases judgment, shifts atmospheres, opens doors, breaks chains. And here's the part that haunts them. You don't even announce it. You don't strategize like they do. You simply listen, and when you listen, the universe responds. Every time you obeyed, their grip loosened. Every time you surrendered, their system cracked. Every yes you gave carried a weight their decades of witchcraft could never measure. And now they know they weren't fighting you at all. They were fighting your alignment, and that's a war they will never win. Number 12. You didn't just break free. You broke the chain entirely. Survival is personal, but breaking cycles is generational. That's the power you carry, chosen one. The attacks against you were never just about this moment in your life. They were about a bloodline. They were about keeping ancient curses alive, cycles of poverty, betrayal, addiction, rejection, confusion, and sabotage that ran through your family like poison for decades. You were targeted not because you were weak, but because you were the first one strong enough to end what others couldn't. Now imagine this, a chain stretched across generations, each link representing pain carried forward, an ancestor trapped in addiction, another crushed under poverty, another silenced in shame. The chain tightens with every life it touches, and then you show up. You don't just pull against it, you snap it. That's what you did. You didn't fold like they expected. You faced the weight head on. Where others hid from the pain, you stared it down. Where others numbed it, you processed it. Where others accepted the lie, you questioned it. And that single act of courage sent shockwaves backward and forward through your bloodline. Quote this in your spirit. What you confronted, you cancelled. Every tear, every refusal to bow to old patterns, every step you took away from comfort and into truth was dismantling systems that thought they'd last forever. You weren't just surviving your own attacks, you were tearing down contracts made in the shadows long before you were born. That's why it felt so heavy. You weren't fighting for one, you were fighting for many. And maybe you've wondered, why me? Why did I have to be the one to carry battles I didn't start? Because you were built with the endurance to finish them. The pressure wasn't proof of weakness, it was proof of assignment. They thought you'd collapse like the ones before you. Instead, you became the interruption, the moment the curse hit a wall it couldn't pass through. Think of it like this. A wildfire spreads for miles, consuming everything in its path. It moves across fields, across forests, unstoppable until it hits a river. The fire hisses, cracks, and dies because it finally met a boundary it couldn't cross. You are that river. Generational destruction flowed until it met you, and then it ended. Your resilience wasn't random strength, it was surgical. Every choice to heal, every moment of discipline, every rejection of bitterness dismantled strongholds brick by brick. And now, those powers that fed on silence and confusion are scrambling because the fortress they hid in for generations is collapsing. They're terrified because you didn't just break free for yourself, you shifted the entire blueprint of your lineage. You're walking new paths now, territory your ancestors never touched, peace where there was chaos, prosperity where there was lack, clarity where there was confusion. You are not repeating the cycle, you're rewriting it. And no dark system can undo what you've set in motion, because the cost to rebuild those chains is too great. You didn't just survive, Chosen One. You disarmed the bloodline curse, and your victory echoes forward into every life that follows. Number 13. You became the firewall that fried their schemes. Every weapon formed against you became its own executioner. That's the fear you planted in them, Chosen One. You didn't need titles, altars, or platforms. You didn't need to chant louder or call for backup. You stood armed with resolve, raw conviction, relentless obedience, and a spirit forged in pain they'll never understand. And with that alone, you became a living firewall, burning through every dark blueprint they tried to write against you. Now imagine this. Hackers spend hours coding viruses, confident their program will crash the system. They launch it, but instead of breaking through, their own machines glitch, jam, and melt down. That's what your enemies lived through. They spent weeks timing rituals, syncing curses to moons, aligning attacks with your schedule. They mapped your patterns like GPS routes, studied your weaknesses like scientists. And yet, when they launched their assaults, nothing landed. Their outcomes glitched, their curses fizzled, their systems crashed in their own hands. Quote this and let it hit them. You weren't a target. You were the firewall. Every tear, every heartbreak, every night you chose growth instead of revenge, coded your spirit with encryption they couldn't hack. They weren't fighting a person anymore. They were colliding with a spiritual security system built into your very soul. That's why their rituals didn't just miss. They corrupted themselves. Their magic didn't wound you. It backfired, jammed, imploded under the weight of your alignment. And maybe you've asked, how did I repel attacks I didn't even know were coming? Because your spirit was already wired for it. While they were chanting at midnight, you were just trying to breathe, heal, pray, or sleep. Yet your firewall intercepted their energy before it reached you, blocked it, reversed it, silenced it. That wasn't luck. That was design. Pain encrypted you. Obedience armed you. Discernment turned you into a system that sees danger before it fully forms. Think about this. They believed they had the blueprint of your destruction, but the moment they pressed execute, the paper burned in their hands. Every attack they planned became their own undoing. Not because you cursed them back, but because they broke the law the moment they touched what was covered. You weren't the prey. They were walking into the trap you became. Now their fear runs deeper. They know no ritual can survive contact with you. They can't predict you, can't read you, can't strike you, because your firewall doesn't just defend, it prosecutes. Every time they try, they pay. And now they're learning the one truth that will haunt them forever. You're not just protected by fire, you are the fire. Number 14. They've seen your power, and now they're running scared. They thought you were prey, but you were their prophecy of collapse. That's the brutal truth, chosen one. They assumed you were just flesh and blood, a person they could isolate, manipulate, and dismantle with rituals, spells, and whispers in the dark. What they didn't see coming was the storm inside you. You weren't sent here to defend against their attacks. You were sent to end something that had been festering for years. And now, the infrastructure they built through secrecy, fear, and rituals is crumbling because you stood your ground. Now imagine this. A group of architects spend decades constructing a fortress, confident no one can breach it, every stone carefully placed, every trap calculated. But then one tremor shakes the earth, and the whole thing cracks, falls, and buries its own builders. That tremor was you. They thought if you escaped their fire, you'd crawl out broken, scarred, and hollow. But you didn't crawl. You walked out like a living flame. You carried clarity, authority, and undeniable evidence that nothing they conjured had any lasting power. Quote this and let it echo. Your survival became their destruction. Every curse they whispered, every alliance they formed, every ritual they performed, it all failed. You are the undeniable proof that dark agendas always collapse against divine order. And now their coven is splintering. Paranoia runs through their ranks. They don't trust each other anymore. Fingers point, accusations fly. Suspicion poisons their unity. The energy they once launched at you has boomeranged back, tearing their circle apart with nightmares, accidents, and chaos they can't control. And maybe you've asked, why are they retreating now? Because they finally know what you are. You weren't just their target, you were their consequence. They touched you thinking you were just another vulnerable soul, but what they touched was divine jurisdiction. The bill came due, and the price is being paid in their own lives, their homes, their spirits. You weren't simply surviving their schemes, you were dismantling them without lifting a finger. Think of it like this. They played chess believing they had the board mastered, but you weren't a pawn, you weren't even the king, you were the hand flipping the table over. That's why their confidence is shattered. That's why their control is gone. Their system couldn't survive your existence. Now they're scrambling, desperately trying to retreat, to undo what they released. But it's too late. You already won. You've already scattered their camp. You've already exposed their weak links. And now, every step you take is a reminder that they picked the wrong one. You didn't just survive, you detonated their illusion of control. You didn't just rise, you ended their hierarchy. And now they tremble, not at your revenge, but at your existence. Because you are their consequence, chosen one. Their darkness triggered your ascension. Their attacks became your awakening. And now your victory isn't just survival, it's judgment. Judgment on their plans, their power, their pride. They see it now in the fractures of their coven, in the fear that grips their spirits, in the chaos unraveling their ranks. They know the truth. They weren't fighting a person. They were fighting a reset written into time itself. And that reset wore your skin. And so, chosen one, we arrive at the truth. After every fire, every plot, every attack, you stand undefeated. Their systems collapsed, their spells backfired, their unity fractured, but you remain proof that no darkness can override divine order. You didn't just survive, you became their consequence, and that's why they fear you now. If this message hit your spirit, chosen one, make sure you like this video, subscribe for more, drop the number 77 in the comments, and share this with someone who needs the strength to rise. Together, we spread the light wider than their shadows ever could.